It was the mid-20th century. Frank Sinatra was hot, sock hops were very real, and Googie architecture was popping up everywhere. That's right, Googie architecture. You may not recognize the name, but you definitely recognize the design. Googie is the funky, futuristic, sometimes gaudy signature style of architecture that erupted all over Los Angeles in the 1940s and 1950s. It can be identified by its cantilevered or upswept roofs, neon fixtures, steel overhangs, geometric shapes, and bold color palettes. But just because it took over the City of Angels doesn't mean that it was destined to last forever. And as quickly as it erupted, it disappeared. So where did Googie come from? It originates back to 1949, when architect John Lautner, a student of the famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright, was tapped to design a fresh new look for a few coffee shops. The look was unapologetic to say the least. He drew inspiration from the booming car culture and the post-World War II jet age of the late 1940s. In 1952, architecture critic Douglas Haskell was working on a story about the new coffee shops popping up around Los Angeles. He saw the Lautner-designed coffee shop located in West Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard and Crescent Heights, which was named Googie's. Searching for a name for the style of architecture, Haskell thought it was the perfect fit. He described the coffee shop as one that starts off on the level like any other building, but suddenly it breaks for the sky. The bright red roof of cellular steel decking suddenly tilts upward, and the whole building goes up with it like a rocket ramp. But it wasn't a beaming article that he was writing. The article Haskell wrote for House and Home magazine in 1952 was a scathing one, commenting on the architectural style during the Cold War, saying, "It's too bad our taste is so horrible, but it's pretty good to have men free." The name stuck. But while Haskell found the style crass, others found the style enticing, and if anything, traffic stopping. During this time, driving became the main mode of transportation in Southern California. It was a benchmark of financial success, and as more families bought their fancy new cars, business owners recognized that people whizzing by would miss their shops if they didn't do something to stand out. In this case, form followed function, and that function was getting people into their businesses. And Googie was the way to do that. Googie captured the feeling of the future, and whether you loved it or not, it was hard to ignore Googie, and pretty soon, restaurants, hotels, car washes, and amusement parks were adopting the style. So what are the traits of Googie architecture? For one, it's built on exaggeration. It took on bold geometric shapes to grab attention. Cantilevered roofs, like the first ever McDonald's, used a 30-foot high version of its infamous golden arches to hold up the roof. Angled, upswept roofs, like that of Union 76 gas station, started popping up too. And odd, funky geometric shapes. 5 Points Car Wash used a row of tall pylons, while other establishments used starbursts, boomerangs, and other erratic shapes jutting out from the buildings. They used these shapes to create alluring signage sure to stop any car driving down the highway. But while the geometric shapes provided a solid foundation, it was the materials and color palettes that cemented the style as one to remember. Neon signs, steel fixtures, and glass panels were complemented by strong reds, yellows, blues, and greens that came together across Los Angeles. But it didn't stop there. Googie was adapted by the 1964 New York World's Fair, the Space Needle in Seattle, Disneyland's Tomorrowland, the Las Vegas Welcome Sign, and the inspiration behind the look and feel of the classic animation, The Jetsons. The 1962 cartoon didn't just pull inspiration from Googie, it copied it completely. All the animators needed to do was look outside their Hollywood studio windows. Googie embodied the future, and according to Alan Hess, an architect and historian, it made the future accessible to everyone. It brought that spirit of the modern age to their daily lives. According to Hess, Googie was a realization of the future, rather than a sign of what was to come years down the line. People could grab a burger and wash their car and feel like they were living in the future. It caught on fire in the culture and lasted for a good 25 years or so. Googie remained an architectural staple for much of the 1950s and 1960s. But by the 1970s, Googie started to disappear as architecture made way for earth tones, textures, low lighting, and shapes that blended architecture into its surroundings. Hess continued, "The interest in the future, the gee-whiz factors about plastics and nuclear power and spaceflight, travel to the moon, all of these things that had been new and exciting in the 1950s had become more mundane. We landed on the moon in 1969, and then it was over." In the late 1960s, Disneyland completely overhauled Tomorrowland, and McDonald's eventually abandoned Googie for brick buildings with low roofs. Even Googie's, the original coffee shop that started it all, was demolished in the 90s to make room for a mini-mall. Not only was the design style not worth building any more of, but designers couldn't understand why any would even be maintained. In 1986, famed Googie designer Eldon David was quoted by the Los Angeles Times, "I can't see why they'd try to preserve any of them. We were just designing them to sell hamburgers." In the minds of designers, their work was done, and could be easily continued by the work of well-done billboards and advertisements, rather than lengthy, expensive, and gauche construction. But despite the ever-changing architecture that surrounds us every day, if you drive through Los Angeles, you can still see and recognize Googie-inspired buildings. You may not have known its name, but you definitely know its shape and form. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And ring the bell below, that way you're notified whenever we post a new video.